We're back on the Committee of the Whole. We'd like to welcome the panel back and thank you very much for joining us again this morning. I'd like to also welcome Mr. Vince Leon Guerrero, Governor's Special Assistant on Education. But before we broke yesterday, we were on Section 5, Senator Tom Atta's amendment. I'd like to now recognize Senator Atta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday we were actually kind of focusing in on page 6 there on line 15 regarding the amount of the bid bond and the question as to whether the bid bond is posted at the time of submission or at the time when the award, when a proposal, a contract is awarded. And I would like to basically change the language on line 14 through 16 on page 6 to read, and if you just follow along with me, to read, the proposer shall post a bid bond in an amount equal to 15% of its proposal. Now, I propose 15%. In my research, the bid bonds could range anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I took midpoint, and I said 15%. I know that's what the utilities use, is 15%. So post a bid bond in an amount equal to 15% of its proposal. So if he proposes $100 million, then he has to put up a $15 million bid. If he proposes $75 million, it's whatever that is. And then you'll continue on. It says, said bond or certified letter of credit from a bona fide surety agency shall be posted at the time of submission of a bid or proposal, period. That sentence there, now, a bid bond, as I understand it, is basically all the discussions with the surety agency have been completed. But that's a very time-consuming effort. The alternative to that is basically I go to my banker or the surety agency. He knows what my credit background is. He knows I'm good for it. So he'll give a letter of credit, which is basically an alternate instrument saying that, don't worry, we'll cover whatever happens on the bid bond. And again, we understand that the bid bond it really kind of eliminates those contractors who are going to submit frivolous proposals. Or if in the end he gets awarded, he tries to lowball the contract and he gets awarded and he goes, just kidding. So then you have to go to the next lowest bidder, and then that bid bond will actually cover then for the cost of that differential. So that would be my proposal. Instead of requiring them to post a fixed amount, it would be a percentage of the amount of whatever it is that they propose to do. $15%.
Senator, yesterday you had an amendment pending that would have just changed it to 15 million. So would you withdraw that first amendment?
Okay, I'll withdraw that amendment.
Okay. Any objections to that? No? Okay. So on your new amendment, we don't have a copy, but does everyone, Speaker 1, Pat?
Yeah, I don't have a copy, and maybe later on we can see it. But, I understand then at least with the other utility companies that when they go out, then they said they're requiring then apparently a 15%. And I know that I've also called some others, and even with federal projects such as Agura, that it's 5%. So, so there's the average being taken here of using 15%. So I guess it would vary from project to project, department agencies to departments. And, Agura, of course, is a federal, department, and their requirement is only 5%. what they also do is that they use a different language where they would require that either or that a certified check of that amount, be posted, or of course, a bond. So, that's just to let everyone know. The other is, and if you read the language here on lines 18 to 20, is that, there are, of course, all these surety companies on the island that, work with the community and provide, insurance as well and bonding. But the language to limit this only from the Secretary of Treasury, that really again narrows the pool of contractors and developers on the island that could even bid on this. So, and I don't know if that is something that we want to, discuss, further. I'm just thinking that what many of the wordings, of course, here is really very limiting. And we talk about trying to get the best deal that we can, but yet, however, we're just narrowing the pool of contractors or developers that can participate. So, I mean, knowing, of course, that, the mover of of this, amendment, I don't know if you consider some of this information is provided, but I just leave it up to the body. But I just thought that that's important enough to let everybody know just, what this particular section really is addressing.
Thank you, Speaker. Any others on Senator Atta's amendment? There's no objections. Motion carries. To recognize Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I welcome back all the panel members. Thank you for making the time to be here. And welcome, Vince. Mr. Chair, we passed out an amendment. I'm really not sure where it belongs, but in an earlier exchange this morning with Madam Superintendent, she tossed up an idea which I thought really made a lot of sense. So I'm asking the body to provide guidance and wisdom to how this should happen. The idea is that we, I believe, are all in agreement that there's a need for a great improvement. And now we're looking at ways to find money to fix our facilities. But what happens, or has happened at our department, is that we don't have a comprehensive CIP plan. And I really think that without that, then we don't have a cohesive way of identifying what really needs to be fixed, and then how to prevent our facilities and our structures from deteriorating again. This body had passed a statute, or the governor signed into a statute, a measure passed by this body last month, and that's Public Law 31-203, which talks about teaching and learning community. And it talks about what we need to do to ensure that our facilities are up and running. But as Madam Superintendent ignited the thought this morning, is that this might be a way to get some funding behind a CIP plan. And so, Mr. Chair, I have forwarded an amendment that says the awardee must provide and or update a complete CIP plan for the Department of Education. I included the aspects that were passed by a bill that was passed into law last month. And so, Mr. Chair, this is what I'm asking for us to consider. If it makes sense, if it works, I look towards those who are experts in this area to provide that kind of guidance. But I really do agree with the Madam Superintendent that this might be a good opportunity to say that we are serious about identifying an overall plan, and we'll fund it, and then that will drive the facility fixes as needed.
Thank you, Senator Yamashita. Are there any discussions on Senator Yamashita's amendment? Senator Ada?
I'd just like to ask maybe Mr. Leon Guerrero on the panel. Do you know if the Sodexo study that was done a couple of years ago, didn't it do this sort of assessment that's being called for in the amendment?
I know that Tulling can provide more definitive answers, but in short, no, it doesn't. It's not. It does. The assessment that was conducted by Sodexo was a fairly comprehensive but quick assessment of the repair and renovation needs, and is not the same as what's being envisioned in this amendment. Right, Tully?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Guthertz?
I think this is an excellent initiative. However, I don't think, in looking at this, that the contractor that may be identified to meet the intention of this bill would be the right entity to do this. Maybe what we should do is authorize from part of these funds a separate award for an independent entity to do this. I'm not sure if it would be an engineering firm or a planning entity, but I don't think it should be the contractor that does this. And one of the reasons I say that is because, and I really like this part, item 2A, DOE's educational mission, vision, and goals. I think that the separate entity, if it's a planning consulting firm or an engineering planning consulting firm, would be able to interact with the Department of Education on a continuing basis in order to develop this. But I don't think the contractor would be the right entity to do this. It should be a separate activity. And maybe some of the funds from this could be reserved for that purpose. That's just some brainstorming ideas. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Guthertz. Speaker Wampat and then Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, we had passed, of course, and supported the master plan. And of course, the details were not there. And here now is a laundry list of like a checklist, so to speak, for them, for the awardee to actually go through to make a better assessment of what it is really that's needed to repair, renovate, or modernize the schools. And I support it. There is I'm trying to, I'm just reading it now, I'm trying to figure out maybe where we can actually also include this, because the legislature has imposed many mandates on the department, and that's what has made, of course, their work much harder to do when the monies, of course, do not follow. And then I'm trying to figure out, although we have, when you look at 2A, that not just the educational mission, vision, and goals, but there has to be an area, maybe others can help me if they're speed readers, that to find a place to put this, that in doing this, that we take into consideration as well all the mandates, because many times the department actually would come to the legislature and would request for their budget, and they do base it, a lot of it, they base it on the mandates. And then when they put in the request, and of course the request is always like $50 million more or $80 million more, and it's through no fault of theirs. It's really this body, of course, because we've mandated these, laws for them to follow, but yet we don't give them the money. Take, for example, the 14 points. So, and when we go out and we visit the schools, and then when they come into the legislature as well to testify on behalf of their budget, and it's based on one, making sure, of course, is that they hire, certified teachers, librarians, and administrators, and so on. Then for the facilities, we want to make sure they get then air conditioners in, you know, all the classrooms, and sufficient water fountains in all the throughout the campus. And then when the time comes, when you look at the budget for CIPs or even maintenance or supplies and materials and equipment, it's, I mean, it might be adequate maybe for one school, but it surely would not address the entire department. So, and I don't know, I'm asking the mover of this amendment maybe to assist, but I really would like to include that be taken into consideration, because when they go in and do this, they're going to be looking at everything else, because part of this bill also calls for collateral equipment. And, you know, you're going to need some of these equipment as well then to be able to address this this amendment. So that's, of course, later on maybe when the author closes on the amendment, that we can figure out a way to see where then would be best to fit it, or whether it should be a new subsection or a new number. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Wampat. Senator Respicio, and then Senator Adam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I certainly appreciate this amendment, because again, it brings us back to focus to what we have to do to fully to realize that we've implement this bill, should it pass and become law, in a manner that's best for DOE's facilities system-wide. This is kind of in line with what Senator Tamata asked yesterday regarding a project manager. Now I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, and maybe the superintendent can help us, isn't this something that Sodexo should have already done? I mean, when they made their $139 million assessment of what it's going to cost to bring all these schools up to standard, did they work with DOE and reference DOE's 10-year fiscal capital improvement plan that's currently in the books and was recently updated by the same sponsor of this amendment?
The work that Sodexo was doing was to help us to focus the use of the ARA money in the areas that were most needed. And so they looked at the existing facilities to identify, to help us to prioritize where to spend those monies. It wasn't meant to be a comprehensive master plan. I would expect the master plan would also look at the future needs of the department. So the study that Sodexo did was a start, and I'm sure whoever gets the master plan work would use that as a basis to begin the work.
But herein begs the question, shouldn't the person that's the project manager for this project, shouldn't that person also be the person looking toward the future? And so you have a synergy of ideas, and it's one and the same. So you don't have someone that's looking for what's needed today, and then you hired someone outside of that company to look at what DOE needs for the future. Is this something that the project manager can do?
You know, Sodexo is an international firm with a lot of background in different areas. I'm sure this is something they can do. The current contract is not included in the scope, so we'd have to go back to the original RFP and make sure that adding this would be allowed.
Because what Senator Yamashita is mandating here is we cannot afford any more Band-Aid approaches to our fixing our schools, and so there's got to be a greater level of coordination, and I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman and Superintendent, members of the panel, if we can find a way to include this in the project management scope of work, so we accomplish what the mover of this amendment wants to do, but we also accomplish the overall objective of making sure that these repairs are not Band-Aid approaches and they make sense for the long run, because this is the last chance we're going to get. We haven't maintained our schools very well because of our financial condition of the government, and as a result, when you don't maintain a building, you pay for it twice. And so I appreciate the amendment, and I appreciate the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Senator Tom Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I First of all, I think certainly what is being proposed is necessary. I don't know to what extent, you know, when the Sodexo did the work, did they actually identify that, for example, Ontala Middle School should be the first priority, followed by Sanchez, followed by whether, you know, it actually established an order of priority, which this what we're trying to do here should be attended to. So that's one question: is do we already have kind of that guideline as to what are the facilities and what are the priorities that's to be renovated and fixed up? So let me ask that. Is that what the Sodexo report provides?
The Sodexo report suggested recommended investment on a yearly basis so that we could bring the schools up to, you know, a certain level. What we did when we were going through the process is what we tried to do is we knew that we had about $50 million to put into the CIPs, and so we sat down with the CIP team led by Sodexo to determine how, you know, which project should go first. So for instance, we wanted to ensure that we took care of any structural concerns, roof leaks. So that was, you know, the first priority. And so there was a mechanism that, there was a process that was in place to determine the priorities. If we had the full 139, we could go back and determine, based on the work that Sodexo did, how they would address spending those monies. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so I'm not sure then, based on how you responded, if in fact then when you send out the invitation for bid or your RFP, whichever instrument is going to be used, whether you're going to be able to tell the prospective bidders, here are the facilities to be renovated. In the case of Ontala Middle School, it's going to need to have the roofing replaced. In the case of Simon Sanchez High School, you're going to need to replace the whole southern wall of the school. Do we have that level of information?
So what we would do is we would go back to the FCAP, the facilities plan, and as we issue contracts to address the concerns listed in the FCAP, we would identify that those particular items have been addressed. So the FCAP, the report that Sodexo provided, is meant to be, you know, a living document as, for instance, as Public Health goes out and does inspections, if there are new items that weren't on the list, the idea would be to add to it. Or if maintenance goes out and fixes a problem and identifies another problem, we would identify that. Waterworks has been working with us on leak detection. If they find a leak that wasn't on the list, we would add it to the report. So the report's supposed to be meant to be a living document, and as we fix items that were identified on the list, you know, we should be checking them off. And as we identify new items, we should be adding them on.
I'm concerned that there's probably not sufficient information right now to be able to really draft up the specifications for this request for proposal or this invitation for bid. And given that, it seems then that we really would need to consider, I guess in this undertaking there would be three components. Somebody's got to go in there and make the assessments and design and provide the design and the specifications of what needs to be done. And then you need a contractor who's going to go in there and actually implement that design. And then we're going to need to hire a construction manager who will then make sure that the contractor is in fact building according to the specifications. And it would seem then that insofar as the design component is concerned, that what the amendment that's being proposed is probably pretty much outlines what needs to be done. Now, The way, so I think this amendment that's being made is relevant and needs to be incorporated, but it probably needs to be incorporated in a section which really has language to the effect that that would read something to the effect of project design, project management, and project construction shall be allowable costs under this chapter. Because right now, all we're looking at, all the discussion has been to go out there and find somebody who's willing to front $160 million to renovate and repair our schools. But there's nothing in here that says that we would allow project management and project design to be allowable costs. On top of that, I think under the project design component, if we don't include that in this undertaking, I don't think we're ever going to get out of first base, because somebody's going to have to be able to really be able to put together a good bid specs and just prepare that package to be put out to the market, to give to GIDA, so that then when they put it out to the market, whoever's going to bid on it has a pretty good idea of what it is that we're looking for. But we got to start internally to define what it is that we really want. So I guess to the question of the mover of the amendment is, where do we put it? I'm not quite sure where we put it. Probably other than that section, which I'm going to make that amendment to include for what's going to be an allowable cost.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Guthrie, you had a question for the panel?
I think the amendment that was offered is really talking about a fiscal master plan for the Department of Education. And I know the author is familiar with those because, the University of Guam has done fiscal master plans since its inception, starting with our presidents of the past. And that has sort of been the guide that has helped the university identify the kinds of facilities it needs, primarily new facilities it needs, and to identify resources, funding. By having a fiscal master plan, that helps you be able to go to funding agencies and make a case for financial support of the projects. What I would like to suggest is maybe in the bill we can include a section which would mandate a fiscal master plan for the Department of Education, but would not make the repairs of the schools contingent upon that plan being done first, because we need to get the schools fixed. The schools, this could delay the whole effort for a long period of time, getting these kind of things done first. I agree with the previous speaker that there should be a project management approach to project design component of this bill. I also believe that the entity that was contracted by DOE to do the initial evaluation maybe should be talked to again to talk about, can they expand what they did into a fiscal master plan for the department? So we can incorporate this in the bill, mandating DOE to develop a fiscal master plan and reserving some of the funds from this for that. We should incorporate in the bill language dealing with this initiative must be guided by a project design component and a project management component that represents the interests of the department. This would influence how the bid specs are written and what the components of all of that are. and then after an award, ensuring that the best interests of the people of Guam and the construction phases are represented. And this could be more of a perspective initiative, fiscal master plan for the department. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know how my colleagues feel about it, but I think if we just look at this as a precondition, then we're not going to get this project moving.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gatos. We'll dispose of this amendment first. Any other discussion? If not, we'll ask the mover to close on our amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Public Law 31-203 does already require the Department of Education to craft, update, maintain Teaching and Learning Communities Act, and that is a master plan. So that is already in statute. The concern continues to be that that is a mandate, but there's no monies to carry out that mandate, as Speaker Wampat has stated. We believe, Madam Superintendent and I think this is an opportunity to say that if we're serious about addressing our facilities, that this is an opportunity to say that we'll put our money to do that. I greatly appreciate the thoughts and the comments by Senator Tom, and I think that really could be a way to go. And I heard him saying that he's going to be proffering an amendment to determine a section about project design, project management. And again, as I stated earlier, I'm really not sure how to place this or where it is to be placed, but I really do stand by my thought that we need a cohesive plan so that we can best leverage these limited resources and best move forward so that in 3 years we're not back here figuring out how to fix something that should have already been determined. This money is not a lot of money, but it is a lot of money. And so we want to use it as wisely as possible, and I think it does need to be based on a capital improvement plan. And while it might take away from some time, I do believe that's going to be time very well invested in. So I'm asking my colleagues to consider that. And again, Mr. Chair, I don't know where it's supposed to be placed. I don't know if we should wait until Senator Tom makes his amendments and include it as a part of that. I'm really not sure, and I'm asking for guidance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Before we call the vote and not knowing where to place it, if that's okay with the mover, that we would leave it up to legal counsel to determine where it's placed, unless there's any other suggestion from the body. Senator Ada?
Can somebody clarify with this bill, is this going to go out as an RFP or an IFB?
I would believe that it would go out as an RFP under KETA, right? So we would be asking for qualifications.
So it appears that just from the discussion that's taken place in the last 15, 20 minutes here, I get the impression that we really don't have sufficient information to be able to put in that RFP, some specifics as to what it is that we're looking for, other than maybe an RFP that says we have $139 million worth of renovation and rehabilitation and procurement of school buses that needs to be accomplished. Who's willing to step up, and what's going to be the best interest rate? It seems that that's what the specifications of that RFP is going to have to come out with, and then whoever is going to propose is going to need to be given 30, 60 days to go out and visit each school and say, for $130 million, I'm only going to be able to rehabilitate and renovate 10 schools. Another guy's going to come in and says, I can renovate 20 schools or whatever. It's a shot in the dark.
Point of information, Mr. Chair, please.
Yes,
A
Senator
request.
Mays.
Aren't you telling the Sodexo report? Isn't that where the $139 million came from?
Yes.
So the list of projects that would be bidded on is a result of that report, right?
So the way it works now is we start with the Sodexo plan, and then the A&E firm puts together designs that are used to put out bids, IFBs. I think that this envisions someone coming in and perhaps doing the entire, looking at the Sodexo plan, putting the design together, and then determining how to, or find a contractor to do it, whether it's internal or external. I also hear that there's been some discussion about possibly segregating some of those duties to try to make sure that the best interest of the department is kept in mind.
I just,
But
that was supposed to be the guideline, right?
Right. Currently, the Sodexo FCAP is the blueprint that we're using to renovate our schools.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair. Talling, how much has Sodexo completed on the assessment of the schooling? Did they do 100% assessment already of all the schools?
Yes, that was included in the report.
And how much of the A&E has been completed?
I think almost all of it. Well, what we're doing is A&E for the $50 million, for the money that we have. So we're not doing A&E for everything that's in the FCAP.
So then the A&E side only for what was
Right.
not the complete.
Right.
I see.
And of the items that we've asked them to work on, I think the only there's 2 projects that are outstanding: plumbing and doors and windows.
So then we don't have to go back again and reinvent the wheel on what Sodexo came up with and what A&E has completed. We just need to complete from where A&E stopped to.
So yesterday we said that there's about $80 million, I believe, worth of work that's left on the table. Designs would have to be prepared for that before it could go out on bid if we were following the model that we have in place today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Ada, you still have the floor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it appears then that based on just what Ms. Taitano has indicated, is that there's probably sufficient information to have that the DOE has a good idea of what projects need to be done with this $130 million that we're trying to secure. Is that correct, Ms. Taitano? And so maybe it seems then, given that there's a plan to kind of bring the school facilities up to par today, up to today. But the amendment that's being proposed right now seems to be a moving forward. You know, we fixed the schools today, but we know that in another 5 years, we're going to need to look at expansion. We know that there are some things that we don't need to do today. We can probably defer that. So given that, it seems that this really should not be a precursor to the undertaking of construction activities under this $130 million, such that then to say that the awardee must provide a plan, we must make it clear that really that's kind of like a separate project. And it should be an allowable cost under this $130 million. So that, you know, we want to set aside, let's say, maybe $129 million for what's already been identified by Sodexo, plus the procurement of collateral equipment, plus the procurement of up to 50 school buses. And then setting aside $1 million, let's say, to then, while that construction is going on, to be doing a looking down the road activity to then really provide more of a master plan that is envisioned by this amendment, but should not be made a precursor to undertaking the work that's already been identified that needs to be done by Sodexo.
I will take a short recess. Back on. Senator Yamashita, recognize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, first let me just state that I truly appreciate the collaboration and the brain power and the really good things that can happen when people work together. To start with, Madam Superintendent sharing an idea, and then members of this body actually making this work. Mr. Chair, I withdraw the amendment that I proffered earlier today, and I have an amendment in place of that.
No, okay, so, Senator?
Mr. Chair, the new amendment that Senator Tom Atta helped craft would be under section called allowable cost. Project design, construction, and management shall be allowable costs under this chapter. Up to $1 million shall be authorized for the implementation of Public Law 31-203. However, implementation of Public Law 31-203 shall not be required as a precursor to any construction, renovation, or procurement activities identified in this chapter. Mr. Chair, what this will do is ensure that a master plan gives funding for an actual master plan, which is actually identified in Public Law 31-203. And at the same time, all of the work that has been researched and done by Sodexo can continue. As the Madam Superintendent had described, there has been some work that has been done. And so this is the amendment that is being proffered now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Tom Atta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. I agree that with this amendment that's being made, it allows us to move forward to basically implement the work that has been identified by Sodexo to bring the school facilities up to par. The provisions of Public Law 31-203, as I understand it, would then now be to work that will go into many of these facilities, such as, for example, as was explained by Mr. Leon Guerrero earlier, to go in and take a look, for example, at Price Elementary School, wherein over the years, additions were made to the facility to provide additional classroom space. But nobody identified that we now need to expand the cafeteria to be able to accommodate the additional number of students. And those are the sort of things, I guess, moving forward, that's the sort of analyses and assessments that need to be done to ensure that the schools continue to grow along with the school population that is being serviced.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Any other discussion on the amendment? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Duenas, you recognize on your
Mr. Chair,
amendment?
are we just going ahead and inserting our amendments now, or are we going section by section?
I guess since they're here and we have them, we'll just go ahead and I'll entertain that.
Just, okay, thank you very much. So I would like to go ahead and proffer an amendment at this time then. And it's been passed out to everyone. Senator Atta, I'm sorry I took yours. I'll give it to you. Yeah. Mr. Chair, dovetailing on the comments of Senator Yamashita and collaboration, I worked with Gita to ensure that the schools could, and the administration, and they kindly agreed to ensure that the schools get every possible dime for the repair, renovation, and moving forward to ensure that we maximize these funds. Gita has done some great work for many years, but especially over the last couple of years with regard to packaging and helping the Department of Public Works. And we all know about all the projects and the things that they've done. And they're using their resources quite well. We want to ensure that we maximize, as I said, the money for the schools. So this basically reads, the following language is added to the end of section 3 to read, Gita shall not receive any fees for the issuance of lease financing agreement, but may recoup any unbudgeted expenses it incurs as a result of its participation in the development of the agreement and related documents. So basically, Mr. Chair, they're allowed to, this is not going to be a freebie per se. They're going to recoup their expenses, but there basically will be no capitalization or basically no funds, as in other arrangements with Gita. So This really makes sure that we maximize all the resource going to the schools, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Gutherts.
I'm wondering if we could just add 2 words at the front end of that amendment. Insert administrative overhead costs. Fees and administrative overhead costs.
So amendment to the amendment.
Yes, sir.
On Senator Guthert's amendment to the amendment, the no objection. Senator Tom?
Maybe if I just need to understand the issue better. Mr. Pangilinan? According to the law right now, GIDA, I believe, takes off 2% on the top of any amount that it finally gets floated.
There's a formula, and it's a percentage of the first 10 million, and then it goes into $10 million chunks afterward. Is a smaller percentage.
How much, let's say, on a $100 million loan, on a $100 million transaction, how much would GIDA get out from that, roughly?
Gosh, roughly, I don't have. I mean, the 235. I want to say maybe a little over 100,000.
Okay. Does that also pay for the cost, the fees that's charged by bond counsel?
No. Those are the fees that I believe Senator Duenas is excluding.
So how is bond counsel going to be paid?
I'm sorry, not excluding, but he's saying that the fees are outside of the expenses. So the expenses get paid for as a general cost of issuance. And so that all gets lumped into the total cost of issuance for an issue?
So then let me pose the question differently. By then having a provision that says you will not receive any fees for the issuance,
right?
What then what sort of costs then will you not be able to pay for? In other words, when you get the $100,000 for issuing this $100 million bond.
That's recognized as revenue for GIDA that we
Right.
use into our general, it goes into our GIDA general fund that we use for operational costs.
My gosh, how much have you earned already just this year alone from the floating of the $100 million recently? I'm getting ready to introduce a Garvey bond for $75 million. You must be a pretty well-funded agency.
I don't have the exact number, but I mean, I mean, you know, the hard work of my staff, I think we've deserved every penny of it.
Oh, I think every government agency works hard.
I mean, you know, we've come back with some.
It may mean having to cut back on trade missions, maybe.
Well, I mean, you know, these monies are used to market Guam to outside investors. They're used for our general expenses, for our lease. I mean, it just goes into the general fund, essentially.
For this particular issuance, do you think it would have any significant negative impact on the ability of GIDA to carry out its mission? Or is this a drop in the bucket?
I wouldn't say it's a drop in the bucket, but I mean, yeah, it'll hurt, but at least we're able to recoup expenses, and so, you know, we're not we're not at a net negative.
Okay, so you're not opposed to the amendment?
No.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
It's for the kids.
That's right, for the children. Mr. Chairman, on my amendment to the amendment.
Okay, yes. To add, can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, just to insert the words after fees and administrative overhead costs.
Okay.
Administrative overhead costs. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Carl, if you can, there's a question on what are the administrative costs?
Well, yeah, I was asking what the definition of administrative. I mean, we can't log hours and get
Charge overtime.
right.
You can't buy new equipment
No.
as part of your administrative processing. generally administrative overhead costs are charged against federal grants and stuff. And in this case, you're sort of doing this as a commitment to the school system. So, but the other part of the original amendment allows for you to, if you have marketing costs or anything you have to incur in that regard, you can get reimbursed for that, but not normal administrative costs.
Understand? Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, on the amendment to the amendment, no objections? Passes. On the original amendment, Senator Duenas, would you like to close on it?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate once again my appreciation for the commitment expressed, and as we said, this really is for our children, and every dollar counts. It's $100,000 more now towards the million, could be, in terms of the master plan, and that goes a long way. So I thank you very much once again for your willingness to participate and to help our government in any way you can. And thanks to the GITA folks. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator. Before we take the vote, Carl, can you just explain, you said earlier that this would equate to maybe 100,000, right? But what would the unbudgeted expenses be? What could that come up to?
I don't have that. I mean, you know, we usually compile all of that stuff at the time of closing. And so just depending on the number of hours that bond counsel has put into it, underwriter counsel, I mean, there's a given number of expenses. And I also like to point out, I mean, you know, we do get the fees for certain issuances, but our work doesn't stop once we close the bond. I mean, we're married to this bond for 30 years. We're in charge of monitoring it for the life of the term. We've got disclosures, you know, to put out. So, I mean, it's not like a, you know, a luxury fund for you know, trade missions and whatnot. I mean, this actually goes toward the staff that looks at monitoring the bond for, you know, the life of the term. As far as what the expenses are going to be, I mean, I can give you probably a rough estimation, but I won't be able to furnish that right away.
But it won't be over 100, or about 100,000.
I don't know. I don't know that. Yeah, it all depends.
Okay. Are there any objections to the amendment? No objections. Motion carries. Vice Speaker Cruz, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have one other amendment, and I apologize for noting it incorrectly. It should read Amendment to Section 3B. I was using the old, I mean the more recent one, whatever, the last iteration. So it should read 3B. And my proposal, Mr. Chairman, is to exclude alcoholic beverage tax, liquid fuel tax, and tobacco taxes by striking those lines on page I had it here. On the bottom of page 4. Lines 21, and inserting in its place, excluding the alcoholic beverage taxes, liquid fuel taxes, and tobacco taxes. Mr. Chairman, I put those three in there for a very specific purpose. The alcoholic beverage tax and the tobacco tax is part of our Healthy Futures Fund. I included the Territorial Highway Fund because I thought that the two sponsors of the two bills, 340 and 347, were interested in protecting the university. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the bonds that's being used to pay off, I mean, one bond that's being used for the university right now is being paid off by the Territorial Highway Fund, for which many of us are being criticized of using highway funds to pay for university expenses rather than fixing the roads. But I'm not married to that. They can have the highway fund for all I care. My concern is, I'm just saying you guys included this in this bill and I'm trying to save it out, but if I had my druthers, the one that I am very strenuously insistent that be taken out and excluded from this is the Healthy Futures Fund money of the tobacco and the alcohol tax. Mr. Chairman, I provided you all a spreadsheet for the last few years. The amount that's received by the Healthy Futures Fund is minimal. It's 12 million so far this year, and 11 million in well, it was 12 million last year. I unfortunately don't have the audited amount for gross receipts for 2011. But in 2010, it was 188 in gross receipts, BPT, and 11 million in the Healthy Futures Fund, 182 in 2009, of which 8 was in the Healthy Futures Fund. Mr. Chairman, as the Chairman of Health, you know that the Healthy Futures Fund is used to underwrite the cost of the prescription drugs. And equally important, if not more important, it provides funds for the Cancer Trust Fund. And you had, Mr. Chairman, a hearing a couple of days ago on the medical referral office. And I think many of the members that attended heard probably one of the most compelling testimony given by a mother about how important the Cancer Trust Fund is to the patients. You know, I mean, I could not even express how it just ripped my heart out to hear that testimony. You know, I understand that the problems with cancer. I lost 2 people that I love very much in the last year to cancer. But if a mother wants to protect and provide for their child, we cannot, and I refuse to be the death panel that says there's no money left. All I'm asking is that we exclude the Healthy Futures Fund money, which is less than 10% of the total amount. And I've also tried to include in the Territorial Highway Fund, but if the rest of you insist on leaving the Territorial Highway Fund, and I'm not going to fight it. But I've just tried to include it because I thought that the 2 main sponsors would want to protect the amount of money that's being paid for the university's bonds. So I offered this amendment to take those 3 taxes out. And you would still have $160 million to pay off the $25 million that we're now paying, that we'll start paying on the 2 bonds that have been floated, or just a little over 20, plus whatever you're going to have for this. So all I'm asking the body is to please protect the prescription drug and the Cancer Trust Fund by excluding the Healthy Futures Fund. And for those of you that want to protect the university, then leave in the amendment to also to exclude the Territorial Highway Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Are there any objections? Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just want to ask Gita to go over the why this section is structured the way it is, and if taking these amendments out would make it difficult to secure financing.
Thank you. This section is structured to define what the BPT is. I think what the amendment is asking, it would be to partition certain areas of the BPT. You know, I think I'll answer it in 2 parts. Number 1, is it allowable? Yes, but I'd need to point out that this could affect marketability and coverage because we're piecing out, and you know, based on this, these equations here, you know, roughly 10% of the overall BPT fund specific to this issue. So there could be some challenges in that regard, but is it allowable? Yes, I just wanted to point that out.
I mean, certainly it's allowable because we can partition any funding sources coming into this government, but by allowing this, it makes this project less marketable and makes the ability to secure this kind of financing probably unrealistic, because the way the current bond bond is structured, it's also from the business privilege taxes. And before the Gov Guam gets paid, the bond holders and those who chose to buy those bonds have to get paid.
That's correct.
And which is why, you know, it's very difficult to raise concerns or even an objection to this kind of amendment, because we all want the same things. We all want the government to respond to the needs to take care of health, education, and public safety, and having this kind of amendment kind of makes it difficult for the overall objective of the bill. You know, I remind the body that yesterday the same mover of this amendment, we adopted his amendment that requires the governor to provide written certification that going forward in this bill would not affect health and public safety. And so you know, that's some kind of assurances I can get that once the administration provides a written certification that this will not affect the very things that the vice speaker is bringing up, it means that we can move forward if Bill 437 passes and is signed into law. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to raise an objection only because of the idea that if this amendment passes, then everything that we were discussing in Bill 437 would not be implementable, because the financing is the key to making sure that this is implementable. And those other areas will be addressed by the governor's written certification that those areas that the vice speaker brought up will not be impacted at all.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Before I ask this mover to close, any other discussion? If not, Vice Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to my majority leader, I don't think that this is going to kill the bill. I mean, it's, as I've shown in here, the amount for the Healthy Futures Fund is $12 million, of which you know $8 million goes to the prescription drugs. And the balance of the $4 million goes to the Cancer Trust Fund. If this body is ready to vote to oppose this, just know it's the prescription drugs and the Cancer Treatment Fund. If you want to segment this out, as I said, you can have the Territorial Highway Fund. I only put it in there to protect the university. But if I had to choose between the university's bond, the Healthy Futures Fund to protect the Cancer Treatment Fund and the Prescription Drug Fund, I'd give up the Highway Fund. You can have it. But I will strenuously fight any attempt to take one more penny from the Healthy Futures Fund. As it is this year, there have been tax credits that have been taken against that, which completely undermines the reason for which we increase the tax. So I leave it to the body to make the determination whether they're going to support it and protect the Cancer Treatment Fund, Trust Fund, and the Prescription Drug Fund.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Ada?
I would just like to note also that with the liquid fuels taxes, out of that is funded the mass transit services, which provides transportation services to really the most needy segment of the community. And so it's already underfunded as it is. And to jeopardize that funding source for the mass transit services is only going to make matters worse. The liquid fuels taxes also funds a large part of the Department of Public Works activities. And so I would agree that we need to leave the liquid fuels taxes alone. Now, had this body, you know, approved the bill that I had introduced earlier to remove the tax exemption, that would have produced an additional $2 million a year. But we saw, I guess the body saw fit not to do that, so we'll move on. But I would ask the body to leave the liquid fuel taxes alone because it is really not sufficient right now to do the things it was designed for, and to further hack away at it, it's just going to worsen matters for other, I think, critical services in the community.
Thank you. There's been an objection to the amendment. Senator Respicio?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask again so we're clear, if this amendment passes, what is the likelihood of securing financing or pledging these revenue sources if these revenue sources aren't available to be pledged?
Again, my only answer to that is that it just reduces our coverage levels, which makes it that much more challenging to market. If we had the entire pool of BPT, as we did with Series A and Series B, then we have that whole pool to leverage against. If we carve this part out, it just makes it that much harder to market it.
But basically, you're just pledging this as collateral, and you're not. This amendment is not saying that take the money that goes to Healthy Futures Fund and pay the repair of the schools. Take
Correct.
the money that goes to liquid fuel tax and we'll no longer upgrade our highway, and as well as the monies that go to University of Guam and our mass transit system. I just want to be clear that, Mr. Chairman, that we're really talking about the same thing and agreeing about the same thing. And these general comments that by not supporting this amendment, people are not going to get their prescription drugs, because there's a lot of people that monitor what we're doing on TV. And it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple and clear cut as if this amendment fails, once this program is implemented, people will no longer have money to buy their medication, and people will no longer have some semblance of a mass transit system that we have now, and money to the University of Guam is not. I mean, isn't this the same rationale behind the securing the business privilege taxes to float the $343 million bond?
You're absolutely correct.
And the one reason why we got a AAA or whatever the rating was, I know we got a really good rating, and the bonds were sold almost immediately, is because of how the bonds were structured.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so this is basically, if we want to get the same, because if this passes, and then you guys are able to work with Responder to get the financing, if this passes and then the interest rate comes back at much higher than what it could have been, then we're going to hear the same criticisms that we're doing something that is so expensive, we cannot afford it, the interest rate is so high. So this is, I think this is where rubber meets the road in terms of whether or not we really want to do what we said we're going to do in Bill 437, and whether or not we have the capacity and the hope that we're going to be able to fund these things, and the understanding that by having Section 3B as it's presented, it does not mean that we're going to divert monies for these critical programs to fund this other program. And again, there was an amendment made by the same mover, this amendment, that requires the administration to provide RIN certification that these areas will not be touched. And so I just want to be clear that adopting this amendment may not mean that, I mean, will mean that we're not going to be able to implement Bill 437, and that's the concern and the objection I raised. And so it's not as clear as what the amendment is being offered, that doing this will take away from these critical areas. So again, I restate my objection.
Thank you, Senator Speech. I know we said we're going to close, but we'll try to extend accommodations. Senator Barnes and then the Vice Speaker.
Cizos Masi, Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity. Just based on the past couple of conversations, I think it's really important to bring to mind that I want to ask Gita, in any event as what is happening right now, based on the amendment going on to make sure that the Healthy Future Funds won't be tapped into. We are talking only about the business privilege taxes, right? In any form, will the TAF funds be tapped into if this legislation were to go through?
Know that the lodging provision was removed during the markup.
So the tourist attraction fund is not included in this and will not be included, because if not, I mean, if I have to just add to Vice Speaker's amendment that the Healthy Futures Funds not be touched, then my concern is making sure that that tourist attraction fund is not touched either.
That concern was addressed during the markup and thus omitted from the
Thank you.
definition, right?
Thank you. Vice Speaker, you can close again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe before we vote, I don't have the phone number to Reverend Tax, but it might be enlightening to the members if the administration representatives might call John Camacho and ask him how much tax credits have been taken against the Healthy Futures Fund in the last year as a result of the tax credits this legislature has allowed. Because I want to address the issue that it's not being protected now, and it hasn't been. And with this bill, we're going to commit it for the next 30 years.
For a point of information, there's also a requirement that those accounts be reimbursed, and I think we set it up that way.
They also know that GASB has allowed them to borrow against all of these funds and then write it off at the end of the year. I've been fighting against that for a while, and it's not. And all I'm trying to do is protect the Healthy Futures Fund. And you have $160 million. If you can't float it with $160 million, then forget it.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Before we vote, we'll take a short recess. Committee of the Whole is back on. While we wait for the information that the Vice Speaker requested, we can go ahead and dispose of the amendment. Vice Speaker, on your amendment to amend Section 3B.
I'll go call for the question.
Okay. All those, there's been an objection to this amendment, so all those in favor of the amendment? Motion passes. Okay. Believe we've exhausted the amendments that need to be made. If not, Speaker Wonpat, you recognize?
As the amendment maybe is going around, I can talk about it. And originally, I was going to put it after Section 3, but then, of course, now, because I'm trying to read back the other bill, but on page 4, where it says A, that I think this best fit in that section because it says to take advantage of the tax-exempt financing, and that's what this is about. And that what it is that it would read is that to minimize the financing cost to the education agency, financing utilized by the contractor to fund for all this work to be done, that they shall.
Is your mic on? I can't really.
Yes, I'm sorry. Just let me move it up. There.
Thank you.
Can you hear me then?
Yes.
Now? Okay, that what it is that of course, shall be through a tax-exempt obligations or other financial instruments provided such financing is available at an interest rate no more than 8.5%. The reason, because earlier if you look at the bill, remember one of the things we talked about, we did not have a ceiling on a dollar amount. We have that now. We have not even addressed an interest rate, so that's what this is going to do. I mean, that's what we've done, and unless maybe you feel that there's a figure, a percentage much less than that is even better, of course. But we must have some type of a ceiling, so that's what we're putting. This is similar, of course, to the other financing for the other schools. So, and of course, I leave that up to, Gita then to make that decision. And then alternatively, the contractor may use alternative methods of financing, including but not limited to grant, short-term debt, mortgage loan, federally guaranteed loan, or loan by an instrument of the United States of America, if such financing will better serve the needs of the people of Guam. So what this is doing is that it's giving other options as well, again, to the government in terms of what is available out there, because you do know that we do have these QZAPs that, although I think after one more year that would have expired, but there would be available financing of even like $10 million just for interest. So I'm just saying that, we typically always use the same type of financing, and I think it's the easiest route to go to. But we got to start looking, outside the box and looking at other ways and giving the government, options to look at. Like I said, that there are federal grants out there. USDA also is able to give out some loans, and I know I've spoken to them about a loan for another institution, educational institution, and their loan is actually about 3.75%. So, and that's, you really want to take advantage of that, of course, because that would terminate in the new fiscal year. So that's what the purpose of this is, that use of tax exempt and other financing instruments for financing. So that's the intent of this amendment. And it would probably best fit, and legal counsel can determine that. I know I put after Section 3, but I think it would really fit after A, after line 18, or just like a new subsection B if it needs to be renumbered.
Thank you, Speaker Wonpat. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. Ms. Chairman, again, given the amendment that was just adopted and the discussion surrounding the amendment as it was being proffered, one of the reasons why this government was able to get an excellent percentage rate for the bonds to pay the tax refunds is because of how it was structured. And I want to ask Gita, if given the amendment that was just adopted, does the 8.5% cap seem realistic, given the market conditions and?
Yeah, given the market conditions, I mean, first of all, any authorization that has the word lease in it, you already need to add 50 to 60 basis points. Given the current low interest rate environment, we're told by our experts that although it is a low environment today, that sort of this need for yield by investors, there's a surge for yield by investors, and then this low environment won't be available forever. That said, with the inclusion of the word lease, that adds another 50 to 60 basis points, and now that we've reduced our coverage, the 8.5 is attainable, and I think we'll fit well within it, and so I think it's an adequate cap.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Any other discussion? Senator Blas?
Thank you. I'm actually, this is if the author of the amendment can yield to a question with regards to utilization. This is the purpose for this requirement of the section is to assure the education agency. Is it assure, or do we want to ensure?
Speaker, would you yield?
I'm trying to, where, what line?
It's like the start of a third way down.
Okay. The purpose is to assure, oh, right, ensure.
So it's to be ensure?
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Chair, I'll move to amend, change the word assure to ensure.
Okay, on the amendment, no objections. It passes. Senator Dueñas, on the amendment?
Mr. Chair, I know all morning we've been grappling, and actually throughout the testimony on this bill, with the issue of where's the money going to come from? And I think that's really the appropriateness of this amendment. If there is an opportunity to derive the funds for this endeavor on a net neutral, realizing, generating savings, in order to do that, I can't see how that wouldn't be the best case scenario. And especially since what we did was really come to the understanding on the contractor, on how we would structure that a sub under that structure could really provide that as well. So this is really a level playing field. And I think that's what I appreciate the most about this particular amendment, and as we move forward. We've done that throughout this bill, and I just want to express my appreciation once again for this effort. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. Any other discussion? Any objections to the amendment? No objections, motion carries. Are there any other? Speaker one, Pat?
The other amendment is actually a question in response to the Vice Speaker's question to Gita, and that was the lease payment, and of course, what are we going to be using for payment? And I think maybe Mr. Taitano, I think you tried to find the section, either you or Mr. Pangilinan was trying to find the section in terms of how the payment will be made, knowing, of course, that BPT are reserved right now primarily for the income tax returns. And so this amendment actually says that alternatively, the lease payments to be made, and this is, remembered when I say alternatively, because we had an amendment yesterday on an alternative method of, going out to get the loan and being able to think outside the box to be able to try to pay for this. So that's what a lot of the amendments that I'm trying to proffer here. But what this would do is that then that the lease back, you see, may be made from that Mr. Pangilinan, maybe because yesterday you tried to find the section in the bill in response to the Vice Speaker's question, and you had mentioned that, but I guess you have not provided the language today, but it'll be made as a subordinate pledge, or other reservation of revenue. So the first, of course, would be yes for the income tax returns, but then there will be subordinate, payments as well. And we've done this as well with Section 30 monies, and so what it would be is that to make sure that we address that we do provide for, because we can't say it's going to take over what is originally pledged, what BBT is pledged for right now to take care of the income tax returns.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Espicio?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the rationale behind this amendment, and it makes sense, but I'm wondering if it's necessary because shouldn't the bond covenant already dictate that the first monies that come in shall automatically be used to pay the bonds that we just passed? And so we couldn't now say that the first X amount of money that comes in shall be used to pay this financing, as opposed to what the bond covenant provides for this government to do. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Speaker, your question as to the yesterday's question by the Vice Speaker and Stan Dirks' comments about this revenue reservation needing to be a subordinate pledge. I got some feedback this morning that the adequate language is contained on page 5, starting from sentence, the first full sentence there, any pledge or reservation, all the way down to the end of the sentence on line 5. This language right there indicates that this would be a subordinate pledge to the two BPT issues.
You said line 5 where it says...
Page 5.
Yes.
Line 1, any pledge or reservation pursuant to this section shall be made on lease financing terms that do not cause the lease obligation of the government to be public indebtedness within the meaning of Section 11 of Guam Organic Act, or to violate or breach any existing bond covenant. That's the language that Bond Counsel is comfortable enough to have mean this be a subordinate pledge of the BPT issues.
Senator Guthrie, you had a question?
Mr. Pangilinan?
That's correct.
Because it's already covered?
And if I'm not mistaken, this amendment was issued to address that question from yesterday, but I've got the answer for yesterday's question that is already contained within the bill. So is your question, is it unnecessary? I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Speaker Wampat, you still have the floor. No. Okay, are there any other discussions on this amendment? Speaker, you'd like to proceed with the amendment?
Well, I noticed that in reading, of course, the bill, there's some other language that's definitely part of another bill. So that addresses it. Of course, the only thing now is just the proportion, where it says the revenues, which is on lines 5. All of that language then really is yes, to lines 14. That was in and the exact language of my amendment, and so that then I guess so it's really only the proportion then I guess is what, because of the alternative, and because one of the alternatives that that we have here that is made where, and where it'll be determined, of course. Well, no, I guess it wouldn't. So, no, I mean, I'll just leave it as it is and let the body decide what to do with it. I mean, if where the language is similar or identical, of course, can be deleted. So maybe where it says the revenues pledged, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the last 8 lines, then I'll just delete that.
Point of order. Point of order.
Senator Blas?
Just to point out to the author, your last sentence and comparing it to the last, to the sentence that starts on line 12. Your last sentence says that the instrument needs to be recorded. On the bill, it says it need not be recorded.
But Speaker, you want to delete that bottom portion though, right, of your...
Well, with the exception of the last line, you're right, because
Okay.
that's contrary then to what's on line 5 to line 12. That's what it is. Line 5 to line 12. That section there, I'll just go ahead and make that amendment to delete from the amendment, but I like to keep the last sentence, which is really on line 13, is to remove the word, delete the word not. So maybe we can deal with that, first then. The instrument by which such pledge or reservation is created need not be recorded. I mean, gee, I don't understand the rationale of why is it that we do not want, it being recorded? I mean, what are we trying to hide here? We're trying to be as, transparent as possible, so it should be recorded. Everybody should know. We just place on the voting file that we want to know what the RFPs are, that they should be on websites, and then now once we decide on an instrument or a payment source and all that we're not going to record it and not make it public. So I would move then, at least for that first portion there, is the deletion of the word not on line 13.
Okay,
I got
Senator
a
Blas.
question to Mr. Penglin there. What's the difference?
Again, I would need to go back to bond counsel and to inquire why it was drafted this way. I just missed a call from her, so I don't know if I can.
It's what really bothers me, of course, is that here we are, looking at a bill that's going to affect, of course, everyone, the government in particular. And yet somehow is that, when amendments are being met, that we can't move forward, of course, until, of course, what bond counsel has to say. But we have legal counsel here, and I like to ask legal counsel if you can read that section there and maybe, if as much as possible, in your legal minds, ascertain, what would be the difference of deleting the word not or just leaving the word not? Where the instrument by which such pledge or reservation is created need not be recorded versus it being recorded, that it needs to be recorded.
Well, as far as, if you're asking us, I guess that's why we hire bond counsel, because we're not expert in bonds at all or this kind of financing. This along with, we have a couple other sections that we want to talk to bond counsel about, but, we cannot really comment on this. It seems to be, we would have to discuss it with bond counsel before we could comment.
Yes, that's what they're going to, Gita's going to do, is speak to bond counsel now and get us a quick response to your... Okay, or Senator Guthers has a presentation. So we're fine. Okay, so we'll move on. Speaker, would you be fine if we set this aside and come back? Okay, so we'll set this aside.
So this will be for a new section. And what this is that I know we have the safeguards, and but what we need to do here, aside from, that will be typical of everybody, but whoever it is then that it will get the award, is that would like to stress, of course, the importance of and what the responsibilities are of the developer slash contractor. And the contract shall require that the contractor be responsible for all costs, expenses, and fees of any kind or nature associated with the renovation and so on, including the financing of furniture and equipment for education facility, and to the extent provided by the education agency. The contractor shall be responsible for the capital maintenance of the school, but shall not be responsible for the capital maintenance of the furniture and equipment. The leaseback may provide that if sufficient funds are not appropriated or otherwise available for the payment of amounts due under the lease and any maintenance agreement, the education agency will have the obligation to vacate the education facility, and the contractor should have the right of use and occupancy of the education facility for the remainder of the term of the lease unless mutually satisfactory terms are entered. And for this purpose, the lease may provide that its term shall be extended for a period not to exceed the shorter of 10 years beyond the original term of the leaseback, or such period of time as is necessary to repay in full any financing arrangement pursuant to this act. The capital maintenance cost shall be paid by the education agency on a periodic basis as incurred by the contractor in terms to be agreed in the contract for each education facility. What had happened in experience, of course, with past those that we currently have, some of the maintenance contract are only for usually for 5 years, and then thereafter, of course, it'll be up to the legislature to appropriate those amounts. So it's going to come out of education. There was the question of, as well, in terms of the normal wear and tear of or even damage or vandalism. Should that also come out again, from the budget of the department? So these are just some of the responsibilities that, that we want to have the developer or contractor, I guess, be responsible for, and where, of course, the government also is responsible for, because there is this real big question as to why is it that with JFK, the $1 million maintenance contract was so exorbitant, because what they've done is they've turned around and just said for everything, graffiti, and damages to anything on the campus, they want the government to appropriate all the time that $1 million. So it's important that we separate what is their responsibility and what is the education's responsibility.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Gothard, you recognize?
Is money provided for maintenance in this amendment? How's the maintenance going to be paid for? By?
Well, normally, if you look, of course, that although you have on page 6 for collateral equipment, that was the only thing that was actually provided for, where they're authorized to be able to purchase collateral equipment, buses and bus shelters and all that. But even that in itself didn't say who then is also going to be responsible for that. Typically, we know that for like buses, of course, and bus shelters, it would be DPW. But then when it comes to the school facilities, there's nothing that's mentioned at all. And that would have to be in the RFP, is that if the department then wants to make that a part of the agreement, that they will do then the maintenance. And that what this does is that it actually tells them that what they will be responsible for, so it becomes part of the RFP.
Senator Guthertz, did that answer your question?
It does, but I have a question on the JFK facility. The company that was awarded that construction contract, that included a maintenance provision, did it? And how is that being paid for?
That's part of the debt service. It's $1 million a year.
Okay. Does this reflect that? So it would be paid for then from the debt service. Am I correct? Yeah, okay. So then this is different from that concept though. That's what I'm concerned about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have a different question. I want to ask the superintendent, in Sodexco's assessment of what's needed to bring all the schools up to a level that is acceptable by our community standards, do those cost assessments speak to maintaining these schools? Yeah, I didn't think so. And so when we moved to cap this at $100 million to bring all the schools up to that level, to provide for the purchase of buses, and I hope that there's an amendment to provide for special vans for special needs kids as well, and there will be, and also the collateral equipment. This amendment is good, but there's no funding source or there's no monies that are being offered to provide for maintenance of all of these schools for the entire leaseback period. And so I don't know if we want to be presenting the administration with all of these unfunded mandates and set them up for failure at the outset by telling them that they have to do all of these things, but we're capping the amount and we're now capped the percentage rate to which they can go and seek the financing. So I raise an objection to this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Espicio. There's been an objection. Senator Blas?
And I think, along those lines, the concern that I've got here then is, am I made to understand that we're going to use this money to be able to make repairs on facilities, and make improvements on facilities, but we're not going to have money to be able to maintain the facilities after that? Is that going to be a separate discussion on this?
I'm sorry, Senator. I was
Am I made
distracted.
to understand then, as a result, all of this money is going to be used to make improvements and repairs to facilities? Am I correct? Is then, after we make those improvements and those repairs, we're not putting in maintenance of those improvements and those repairs so that we, in other words, we're gonna pay to paint the car, but we're not gonna include money to wash it?
So the way it works right now is the money that we get budgeted annually to maintain the schools, and that's kind of one of the reasons the schools are in the state that they're in. One of the mandates, one of the laws that was passed recently was a performance contract to do maintenance of the schools. We've issued an RFI, and we're in the process of compiling the responses so that we can do an RFP and look at the possible outsourcing of maintenance. The other thing that you could do, and which has been done with the lease schools, is include in part of the debt service an amount set aside for the maintenance. Alternately, one of the things that could happen in the master plan is to ask the the group that's putting together the master plan to look at ways to fund maintenance, some out-of-the-box ways. So I don't have I hope that answered your question.
Well, you know, and I appreciate it. This whole conversation just brought to light with me a concern that I got. I mean, you know, I'm one for pushing that if we're going to buy something new,
right.
You know, one of the things that government has failed to do for many years is not include a maintenance portion. Yeah, you know, don't tell my father I said that, but anyways. Along those lines, is I want to give you the ability that if there's going to be the improvements and the repairs to this, that you've got enough, or there is a source, or as a result of putting in, you know, I mean, is there flexibility now in what you're asking us to do to include a maintenance provision?
Senator, we've had some discussions with this on the task force. What you're financing in maintenance, you might be taking away from the facility needs. My suggestion to Telling was, in your master planning process, you could actually budget for O&M and have that as a deliverable in the master plan. So, you know, we're kind of, I mean, this is a fragmented effort right now, but that's exactly why we think the master planning process can coincide with this process, because right now you have immediate needs of the agency for facilities. If DOE has the confidence to identify that, like utilizing the Sodexo report, you're mitigating potential costs that are increasing by not addressing those facility needs right away. While at the same time, you know, your master plan could be a dynamic document. So while you're addressing the most immediate needs of the agency, you could also start putting together a master plan, which could potentially enhance your finance capabilities. And I say that by finding other sources that, like for instance, grants and stuff like that, where the planning phase addresses it. And also there could be specific deliverables for an operation and maintenance, what they call O&M in planning, for this. I think it's absolutely a need to have an O&M plan with any facility that you do build. With this effort right now, I think with the effort we had with the identifying funding for a master plan, I think that should be part of the master planning process. But with this right now, if we do start allocating funding to the O&M, we might be taking away from immediate facility needs. But then again, that might be a DOE question or a policy call.
Where are we then with the completion of the master plan?
Well, I think we just got it. Yeah, we just got it funded, I think, right? Yeah.
There's no master plan?
Yeah, one of the issues that came up in the discussion, like for instance with the ARA funding, and other jurisdictions had this issue. ARA funding had to have shovel-ready projects. So as an agency, you might not have all of those laid out if you don't have a master plan already. Part of the value of a master plan is that it's almost like the comprehensive economic development strategy that Gita just submitted to the Economic Development Authority. You have this dynamic document that you continue to update. What it does is, in addition to kind of giving you a strategic avenue,
Henry,
roadmap,
along those lines,
yeah.
Okay, you said this is the dynamic document that you continue to update.
Yeah.
Do you have a document?
No, they don't have one. That's why.
You know, and I'm sorry, but I'm
Yeah.
sitting here and I'm looking at the military buildup in the microform. You know, and it's not to take away from all the efforts. And I've got to take it from this perspective. You know, I hear of a master plan. I've been hearing of a master plan. And I'd love to see a master plan. I'd love to see how there is the discussion and the possible ways of being able to address the O&M. Okay? Maybe that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable with regards to it. And not to take away from, I recognize.
Yeah.
I'm looking around the room, and other than a couple of people who are teachers in here, I have to sleep with one every night, so I know. I want to, yes, ma'am, to make sure that, okay? So, you know, but at the same token, I've got a fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
And my responsibility is a lot of times is looking at a plan. Okay, I don't know whether we can cough one up over in the next couple of hours before lunch and stuff, but that's where I'm at here.
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, I've got to need some assurance that if we're going to spend over $130 million, there is a plan to be able to make sure that you know, there's a return. Not only is there a return on investment, but there's a way to maintain those improvements and those repairs that we've got into the future. Okay? That's the concern that I have.
No, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Guthertz, and then Senator Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, that's why we earlier included a provision, which was really at the initiative of Senator Yamashita, to provide for a mechanism for funding the capital improvement plans, which is basically the master plan for fiscal facilities for the Department of Education. So going forward, we will have something to lay our hat on and be able to project and plan for all of these requirements. I just want to make the distinction between a capital investment, which is the repair and rebuilding of the schools, and a operational requirement, which is the proper maintenance of the schools. And I think Senator Blas is correct that we have to ensure that the two go hand in hand. But I don't want to see that become a precursor, or what some very famous senators in the U.S. Senate have called a pause, to stop the initiative to repair and renovate the schools, which is an initiative that we need to do now. We need to ensure that Department of Education is working with the Chief Executive and this legislature to identify the funds that are required for maintenance at the school system. I think the problem at DOE has been that their maintenance division just can't keep up because of the dilapidation of physical facilities in the schools. Just requires so much, it just can't keep up with it. But if it's a situation where the schools are brought up to standard, to code, then I think it won't be as hard for them, either directly through its in-house resources or through its appropriate contracting, to properly maintain the facilities, provided the funds are made available. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tony Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all that being said about the master plan, are we actually putting the cart before the horse?
Senator, what you might have is kind of two immediate concerns right now. You have an immediate need in your facilities. In an ideal situation, you would want to always have a master plan, and then that be the document you utilize to fund all of these projects. You know, after discussions with DOE, we realized they're at a state where if they don't take care of some of their immediate needs that they can identify internally, you're going to have escalated costs of these repairs and renovations. So that's why I think, as far as our standpoint from the task force is, we feel that there is an immediate need for a master plan, as well as an immediate need for a lot of these repairs and renovations. And I think that you could have those kind of coincide with the solution that was provided by this body. I think you might have that because you're actually allocating funding to fund the other public law. So you could have these two, efforts go parallel. In an ideal situation, you would want to have a master plan, and then that kind of be your strategic document to fund everything else.
But wouldn't we want a master plan so that we're not paying for repairs or renovations that are not needed, and using those funds for other things that are actually needed? I mean, with a master plan, it would be able to tell you exactly what and where the repairs are needed, or renovations that are needed, or what is actually feasible to repair or renovate versus building new. So,
Yeah.
I mean, are we just fixing things that in 5 years or in 3 years are going to say, you know what, it's condemned, we can't, there's no sense of occupying this building any longer because structurally it's not sound.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm coming, where are we putting the cart before the horse? You know, without a master plan.
I think some of these needs are so immediate that we would need to address them because of the fact that it's affecting the current learning environment, but at the same, and the safety of the kids. But at the same time, you're right, though, we do need to have that effort with master planning. I believe that the priority of those needs, is going to really be dependent on what DOE decides as a policy matter. I know that with, like, for instance, with the ERA funding, they had to get a list together because, for instance, the projects had to be shovel ready was one of the funding requirements. And part of what goes into your master planning is identifying the funding sources, and you're basically taking all of the different requirements of the different funding sources, and you're trying to collaborate that and put some synergy into what you want to accomplish at the end of the day. And at the current moment, there isn't a master plan, which is why they've had to put the project list together the way they have. At least that's our understanding. So I don't think it's necessarily putting the cart before the horse, but I think if you don't address some of these immediate needs, you're going to end up paying more eventually anyway. But like I said, that's really a DOE call.
Well, I just don't want to be 3 months down the road that we're back here again doing this all over because we haven't thought this out with the master plan in place and costing us even more money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Senator Respicio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, those comments are very valid and legitimate, and the example that I want to use is the Antalan Middle School, where DOE built the gymnasium, and then even before the ribbon cutting on that gymnasium, the kids had to be relocated because the school was condemned. But to provide some assurances that going forward and how this bill is structured, and with the amendment proffered by Senator Yamashita that recognizes the immediate need with providing for monies to address our long-term need, but to make sure that there's a bridge from today, bridging us to tomorrow, and that we're not gonna do things to repair a school and then have it condemned, because I don't think that's what how the Sodexo report is structured. So there's some basis and structure to which DOE is now going to be given the resources and the money to be able to do all that they need to do for the school system. So there's more than enough assurances that we're not going to be having any more discussions on second guessing anyone, and this will provide the structure that all of us need to feel comfortable about this.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Guthertz, and then we'll call for the...
Yeah, I just want to point out that earlier we talked about the Sodexo evaluation and assessment, and the acting superintendent indicated that they were able to identify what the projects are that need to be taken care of. And I think we can respond quickly as a result of the Sodexo report and be able to take care of the problems at the schools in a very professional way. And at the same time, because of the amendment that was offered, taking into consideration Senator Yamashita's recommendation, the department can develop a prospective fiscal master plan that will assess a lot of different things, including population trends and educational goals and missions, and dovetail that with the fiscal needs of the school. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Speaker, would you like to close on your amendment?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I listened to all the arguments, and basically everyone is saying the same thing, that yes, although this is an immediate need to repair our schools, but at the same time, we need to maintain our schools. And that's, again, the other reason in which this alternative option is provided for, because there is definitely one alternative that we could realize, is that if we have $2 million right now of maintenance cost that the government is paying for, and that's for the 5 schools that are being leased back. And that's almost halfway of the amount, of course, of this performance maintenance contract that we would like to be able then to maintain all of our schools. So, I mean, I just don't want us to go and, you know, build these schools, and then we do nothing about maintaining them. It's like we're going to build new schools, and then we are not going to be able to, you know, make use of the facility. So, you know, these things have to go hand in hand. That has been a major problem of the Department of Education, and that the government is not ensuring then that, you know, although we have a place to use, but yet we have nothing to maintain it. And that's why, and we are a very poor example, of course, of trying to do that when you look at all of the government facilities, because we are just not, somehow we just managed to neglect that. And because we have 30,000 children in our schools day in and day out, and there's lots of wear and tear in our schools, that we need to address this. We don't want to find ourselves again down the road not having again finding ourselves to have to repair our schools. For those of you who don't remember, who weren't here in this legislature, that even at the time when the OFB chair is the current governor of Guam, and we were able to realize some monies from the bonds, and they were to be used specifically again to repair DOE, some of the school facilities. But then emergencies started to come out, and they came back to the legislature and asked us to reprogram the monies. The first reprogramming that took place was a result of Southern High School being closed down. So instead of the monies going in again to maintain our school, what did we do? We used the monies again to focus in one school to try to get it open. So we have to decide, you know, if that we're going to do this and repair our schools, then by all means, you know, we have to make sure that we provide maintenance of these schools. And let's use this opportunity, like I say again, to look at the possibility of $2 million of maintenance monies that we're using, that we could possibly then, you know, reprogram those again to cover more schools in addition and support with you know, monies that we're going to be using right now for our schools, to renovate our schools. So, you know, I offer this amendment because it's like, I don't know, I'm not going to say bread and butter because sometimes you can do without it, but we definitely need to renovate our schools, and we need to continue to maintain them so we don't find ourselves down this road again, you know, in about 3 to 5 years. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Was there an objection to this amendment? Okay, there was. So all in favor of the amendment? Motion fails. We'll take a recess and we'll be back at 2 p.m. today. Yes, 2 p.m.